Hello everyone, Jared here, and recently I was outside getting ready to put up Christmas lights and decorate my yard for the holidays, and I've got this cool little fence that I made, and I was looking to put some sort of a decoration up along it, and I had seen, not quite like this, but some trees similar to this in the store, and they were quite expensive, so I figured I could make one a lot cheaper out of some scrap wood that I had laying around. To make my little Christmas trees, I used two different sizes of some scrap fence planks that I had lying around. First, I used a 5.5-inch dog-eared fence, and I had two varieties of this. I had some regular pressure treated like this, and I had some cedar. Just had a mix. The second size I used is a 3.5-inch cedar picket fence. I had a bunch of these left over from a project that I had done earlier, so I decided to use them. These were originally 6-foot long picket fences cut in half. I started off by taking the 5.5-inch boards and cutting 45-degree angles in the end. I ended up with 4 boards, 34 inches, 28 inches, 22 inches, and 16 inches. Until I got to the 5th and final board, where I cut the pine tree peak in it. I didn't have any sort of choice in how big that board was after you just cut the two 45-degree angles in there, as you can see. Next up, I took those boards and marked the halfway point on each board and drew a line through it. This is going to help me to properly place the tree trunk later. I also flipped it over and marked another end point because I was going to put some smaller overlapping boards over each of these branches, and that helped me line those boards up, having that little end point. And here I am cutting those overlapping branches. These are out of the 3.5-inch fence planks. I'm cutting the same 45-degree angles into them. The total length of these are 30 inches, 24 inches, 18, and 14. That last one is 14 because, as you recall, we had no choice over the total length of the pine tree peak, and 14 inches was the best size that I could overlap those two branches and it would look okay. This next step is optional. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a few biscuit slots into each of these boards. I'm going to use number 20 biscuits. They're a bit big for this, I think, but that's all I have on hand. So what I'm going to do is use this. This is a biscuit joiner. And if you push on it, you can see the little blade come out, and it cuts a slot just large enough for those biscuits to fit in. It's pretty simple to use, but use proper precautions, seek proper instruction. Don't just go off of what I'm doing because they are quite dangerous, or they can be. So to do this, all I'm going to do is line up these boards, mark a couple little lines on each board, and that's where I'm going to cut the slot. You got to do it on each one. Now there's going to be instances where you definitely do not want to use this method because sometimes these fence plank boards are bowed or they cup really well, and it's actually going to make it more of a pain in the butt trying to get the biscuit in. Now that the biscuit slots are all cut, it's time to go ahead and put this first part of the tree together and install the tree trunk. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is glue the biscuits into the boards and also run a little bead of glue along the edge of each and every one of them. And then once I have that all together and pressed in, then we're going to use that initial line that we marked to guide us to put the trunk on. And I'm just going to glue the trunk, stick it on there even with that line, or I'd rather have that line in the center of the trunk, and then run a couple air brads or brad nails through it. I'm using 1-inch nails, and that's just enough to go through both boards and not poke through on the other side. Got the first part of this tree done. Got a little bit of glue there, but I'm actually not going to worry about that because the next step is I'm going to take those smaller branches that I made. I'm going to take a jigsaw and carve some snow mounds into it, sand it down, and then I'm going to fasten it to the front of the tree, overlapping these seams, just to give it a little bit more dimension or depth. But really, this is probably good enough if you just wanted to paint it and stick it out. Or, because this is cedar, it would be okay to not paint it, but why wouldn't you paint it? Next, I'm going to prime the tree, and I'm going to use some Rust-Oleum spray paint and primer. This works pretty good even on wood. And I would suggest you give it a couple coats because I noticed that it absorbs quite a bit of the paint. And I would also suggest doing both sides of the tree. I didn't do that on all of the little trees that I made, and I kind of regret it. I'm also going to do the trunk there, even though I'm going to paint that brown. You'll have to pardon the bit of a mess I've got going on in my workshop, but after I finished priming this guy, I turned it over to my wife, let her paint it because she can do a better job. And then I decided I wanted to fasten some indoor-outdoor Christmas lights to it. So what I did was I took some of these are just coax or cable staples. They work really well for fastening Christmas lights to things, I think. All they are is a little plastic bracket with a nail in there. It's not much of a nail, so you do got to be a little bit careful when fastening them in. But you just take the cable, stick that right over top of it, and then just nail that in. Now, I had to use a nail setter once I got close because this was awful close to the edge of the board. I didn't want to smash it with my hammer. For some reason I didn't prime both sides of this like I did the others, but another thing I did on this one was I just cut a couple little strips and stuck them on there, because this one I did not use biscuits. You can see it's pretty gapped, so that was just to give it a little bit more stability. And then I've got the cord here and here fastened, and I'll have to get a little plastic outlet cover for that. And there we have it. I'll let my wife do the final placement on this and all the other trees. But I like it. It's going to fit well on this little decorative fence, and it'll look good lit up at night. Christmas lights always look way better at night than during the day. Now these things I seen in the store were like a little bit over $100, and they weren't painted. They didn't have lights on them, and they didn't have like these other branches, so I figured I could make this, and I think it turned out pretty well, and it was super simple to make, and I'm sure most everybody out there after seeing this could make one even better than this. So there you go. Thanks for watching.